All right, so let's get rocking. We're at a nice weekend.
Yeah,
Nice weather finally.
well, it was very, very humid here with the storm coming from the south.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so today we're going to talk about weights, sets, reps, and then we're going to deal at the end with some more form correction stuff. We're going to talk today about specifically deadlifts. But let's talk about the weight sets and reps and what that kind of means for workouts. So how do weights, sets, and reps affect anyone's type of training? These are questions that I get a ton from our athletes, from my general clients and stuff, which is things like, how much weight should I use if I want to gain muscle? I have a lot of my college kids who come back to me asking things like that. How much weight should I use if I don't want to get bulky? Obviously, this is something I get a lot from our female athletes and my female clients. This notion that by using weight, they're somehow going to become bulky. How many reps help me get stronger? How many squats or how many sets of squats should I do? And really, at the end of the day, the whole thrust of this presentation is going to be that it really does not matter. And the long answer of that is the manipulation of sets, reps, and weight only has a marginal effect on the outcome of a workout, and we'll discuss more a bit later. Basically, your genetics are going to make up the majority of what your outcome will be. The makeup of the muscle fibers you have will determine what end result and what kind of strength levels, speed, or power that you're going to be able to create. On top of that, also levels of certain hormones, particularly testosterone, will affect what the end results will be for you. I tried to go and look it up in my college database, but I couldn't come across it. But our kinesiology professor, when I was a sophomore, helped him conduct a study where we took two incoming freshman girls who were on the soccer team, both of similar fitness level, but you can tell just by the way that they looked that one of them was a much more powerful athlete versus the other one who was just kind of like a standard looking athlete. We're put on the same exact regimen of weights, sets, reps. And at the end of 4 months, we had tracked muscle size and did a bunch of like birth measurements and things like that. And at the end of it, the athlete who obviously had the much faster twitch muscles in muscle fibers in them, her muscle had grown, almost a half an inch larger than the other girl, even though they had done the exact same amount of work. So unfortunately, you have your parents to thank for whatever your body is going to end up looking like. And really, how do we know this? You can take any two people of similar fitness levels, just like I talked about, same exact training protocols, and they're going to come out the same. If an athlete has a higher level of type A fast twitch muscles, these are athletes who are like sprinters, power lifters, things like that. Or someone who has a majority slow twitch muscle fibers, the development is going to be very, very distinct. And obviously, I just have a picture here of a sprinter versus a marathoner and a sprinter versus a marathoner. Body types and the body styles of this male marathoner. If he had done the same exact amount of weight, intensity, sets, and reps as the sprinter, he was still never going to look like this sprinter. Their genetic makeup is just predisposing them to be one or the other. Same with the females. Obviously, you can really see with the females here, that slow twitch style of muscle fiber is very long, very lean, whereas the faster twitch are very short and kind of rounded there, obviously. So it's the whole chicken versus the egg. Does your training make you good at a particular sport, or is it your genetic makeup? The answer is they both matter. You are predisposed to be good at one thing versus the other, and then you have to take that and then train to enhance it. And then once we identify this, we can try to manipulate their performance. So if we go back real quick, again, I could take this athlete, train him like a sprinter. He might become a decent sprinter. He's never going to be what this guy is. It's just not in the cards for him genetically. And this is a very hard thing to deal with in my profession, because obviously, I have a lot of parents who come to me and athletes who come to me like, I want to get faster, I want to be more powerful and stuff. And I can just tell by looking at them that that's not going to ever be the case. Luckily for youth athletes, we can tip the scales further one way or the other because they're a level of untrainedness that we're able to push them in the direction that they want to go. But like once you get to the elite levels, which obviously these two guys are probably competing in the Olympics here, there's no budging them one way or the other. And I had mentioned this in the previous presentation, but it kind of holds here too as well. The time that Lance Armstrong ran the marathon, and like one of the fittest athletes, granted he was cheating, of the fittest athletes on earth at the time, hops off of his bike after winning 7 Tour de France's and then tries to run a marathon and does terrible. I mean, he did better than your average person just because he's so specifically trained for cycling, and just the way that affects your cardiovascular system, the way that affects his muscles is completely different than running. So it's really just a matter of, the chicken versus the egg. The answer here is basically it's the egg. It's what your genetic makeup is going to make you predisposed to something very good. If you look at someone like a Roger Federer or something like that in tennis, he's kind of made to be a tennis guy. I mean, could he play a different sport? Probably. He was obviously predisposed to be good at that particular type of sport. All right, so digging deeper into how each of the weight sets and reps is going to kind of affect the training. Once we've established that baseline and we know what your quote unquote genetic makeup is like, and then we start playing around with all of these variables, the weights, the sets, and reps. So how does weight affect your results? The higher the weight, the more force is needed to move it. And this will result in you increasing the strength of any particular muscle that you're trying to train. Identifying what weight is proper for you is very key, and it goes into your fatigue level. So if we have a 200-pound athlete, male or female, squatting 200 pounds, that's probably not enough weight for them. If that same athlete is 100 pounds squatting 200 pounds, you can see that depending on your weight and your strength level, we need to adjust the weight to you. Most people, gen pop and novice athletes, will not use enough weight to achieve that fatigue level, or even failure if we're talking about certain exercises. That's really what's most important when it comes to weight. It's not the number, it's how it's affecting you. So if I have I'm looking at my trap bar over here. If I have 300 pounds on a trap bar for me, I know I could pump out probably 10 reps of that. So if I'm looking for strength increases, I need to dramatically increase weight. So it just depends on the person, and that's why in any situation where I'm working with a client or if I'm working with athletes, we're always logging what our weights are. So that way, if we did 250 last week, I know, Timmy coming in is going to be trying to do 205 to 215. That's really where the weight is important, is tracking what it is and then making it progressive. So when we're training for power and power and strength, weight should be higher than when it's training for endurance. So if we have a marathon athlete who's trying to do some strength training, I'm not going to have them do 300 pounds for 4 reps. We need to train the way that their sport or their activity deems necessary. So for marathoners, we'd be doing much higher levels of reps and much lower weight, because we're still trying to achieve that fatigue level. We need to lower the weight, so we're training that muscle in an endurance sense. That real heavy burn you feel when you're doing some particular exercises. So now sets is the one where it plays a lot of part in how I design workouts, but the number of sets will not really vary depending on if I'm training for strength or endurance. And basically the reason why is because of the third variable, which is the reps. So the number of reps will be higher for endurance athletes and lower for strength or power training. And then you combine this with weight, and that will dictate how improved performance across the entire board, which we just kind of talked about. So endurance athletes will work with lower weights at higher reps to augment their performance, which is those slower twitch muscles. They fatigue much slower. That's why they're called slow twitch. That's what we need to be attacking when we're putting together a workout for them. And then power athletes will work at a much higher weight and lower reps to augment their performance, which is those fast twitch muscles. And the fast twitch, again, just like with the slow twitch, the fast twitch fatigue very quickly. These are generally more densely populated in muscles like your quads or your triceps. So like if you've ever done like a leg extension, or your leg starts to burn pretty quickly. That's because it's a majority made up of like a faster twitch muscle. And everyone is a combination of slow and fast twitch. It's just really at the tiny margins where one person is going to have a bit more slow twitch, or someone's going to have a bit more fast twitch. And again, going back to that photo, you look at a sprinter, he's a sprinter, right? You're not going to see that guy with the 45-inch, thighs and think that he's running 20 miles, because his legs would just fall off of him.
Tim, so for say a 5K adult runner who's not necessarily looking to have the world record for some whatever 5K, but is more interested in just overall weight loss.
Yep.
What
we're actually going to talk about right now.
Okay.
So what does this say about how we train ourselves and how I train different athletes? If you're training for a sport, you should attempt to train the muscle how they are used in that sport, which is what we just talked about. And then in sports, so sports that need endurance like cycling or distance running, you should be trained at the higher reps with the less weight and more sets. Sports that need more power should train at that heavier weights for less reps. And then for our Gen Pop, for an average person, it breaks down to, again, what it is exactly we're looking to gain out of any particular type of exercise, whether it's strength training, whether it's speed and agility work, and anything. We need to know, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is what is it you're trying to accomplish, and then design from there. So for someone who's looking for weight loss, obviously you're going to probably want to have them, the exercise, we need it to kind of mimic more of like a cardio style workout. So we're going to use that lower weight, higher reps and higher sets. So we're training those muscles for that endurance style work. So for like someone like running a 5K or something like that, this is kind of how I would set up a program for you to kind of run. If it's, teenage boys or whatever looking to gain more muscle, then I'm going to set them up with a program that's going to be looking at more weight and then less reps. And then for general health, it's basically any combination that you would want to do. So for, the weekend warriors and stuff, if they want to, spend a couple months working on getting more muscle, they'd be using the higher weight with the lower reps, obviously making sure all of our form is good. And then, if that same person decides they want to shed a few pounds, we're going to go back up more towards the weight loss with the lighter weight and the more reps and the more sets. It's really just a complete, it's completely determined by what it is you're trying to do. Ooh, that's my dog. All right. So Penny. Kids are in from the pool. So at the end of the day, the sets, the reps, and the weight mean nothing if our effort isn't there. With our athletes, we spend the majority of our time teaching on how they learn to produce and reproduce effort. Because without effort, the weights, the sets, the reps are absolutely meaningless. And I spoke before about if we have, a 200-pound athlete who's going to be squatting 300 pounds, like 300 pounds sounds like a lot of weight. If we're looking to produce a strength benefit from that workout, a 200-pound athlete squatting 300 pounds is not going to do anything, especially if we're in that lower rep range, like three or four reps. On an average squat, you're looking to 2 to 2.5 times body weight before we really get into the levels where we're going to be able to produce a strength benefit. And specifically with like my Gen Pop, so when I'm working with like average everyday clients and stuff, it's a bit harder to teach them to produce that effort because they generally spent most of their lives either doing things on their own or not having done this type of exercise. So teaching them how to produce that effort is a bit harder than working with athletes. That's why I like working with athletes, and specifically youth athletics, because you get to get them at a time where you're able to really teach them what it means to produce effort and to push themselves. So that's one of the most rewarding things about working with youth athletics.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, what by effort you mean, just paying more attention, say 5% increments, to increase over time, or really
So
yourself?
So by effort, I mean specifically on any given exercise, we need to be working at a high effort level. So for looking for weight loss or something like that, our heart rate is up. At at that last rep, I'm at fatigue, where basically I would be breaking form if I tried to do one more rep. You always want to take yourself to that pretty much to the end. It does not need, so like if I've set up a workout that has, let's say five sets of squats in it, I'm not going to be going to fatigue at every single set. But as I get to the end on my 5th set, I want to make sure that I'm set up at weights and reps effectively, that at the end of that one, we're completely gassed. If it's working with like a Gen Pop client, we're only going through maybe 3 sets of something, I'm going to be pushing them on pretty much every set to get to the point of most failure. And obviously everything is done within safe margin, so nobody ever gets hurt or anything like that. That's what I mean by effort. Effort is, getting to that fatigue level on any particular exercise. Because if we don't, you're not really going to produce any sort of effect on the muscle. I mean, I could tell countless stories about being in, like regular gyms and stuff like that, and see a 45-year-old man sit down on a leg press, and he puts it in the top pin of like 10 pounds, and he sits there and does his leg press for 10 reps, and then he gets up and walks away. And that's basically just because he read in Men's Fitness, I should do 3 sets of 10 leg press and then move on. So he doesn't really take into account any of the effort level or where the weights need to be. If that kind of answers your question there.
Yes, thanks.
No problem. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're going to look at a bunch of variations on our deadlift. So a deadlift is basically defined as anything where we're lifting something from the ground. In this case, we're using an Olympic bar here. The young female is using an Olympic bar. It can be pulled from rack or something like that, but most deadlifts you start on the ground. This is a version, it's called stiff leg and or Romanian deadlift. They're interchangeable for the most part. There's some slight differences, but it's not worth going into. This is a very, very common exercise. It's used a lot for athletics. This hip hinge, as we call it, is the basics of all athletic motion. So whether it's a fielder in baseball in this position, defense on basketball, ready position in tennis, always reproduce this ready position with this like hinge. So we spend a ton of time working on this. And also for Gen Pop lower back health, this is the key motion that we teach. I spend with a general pop client, I spend the first month and a half with them just teaching them how to do a proper hip hinge. This goes along with what we were talking about last week with kind of the lower back postural things, where it really sets our spine in the proper position. And if we're doing it right, it avoids that anterior pelvic tilt, which can cause some of those low back issues. So some of the things we're going to look at here is, number one, she's in what's called hyperextension, which means we have a hollowed outness of her back. And if you can kind of, again, picture that presentation from last week where we had kind of that spine was kind of bowed in, that means her abs are not turned on, which means all of that weight that she's pulling here is sitting directly in her back. So we want to avoid hyperextension, and then we want to avoid the rounded back position. Obviously, this is the exact opposite of this one. And again, all of the weight that she's pulling is sitting about middle of her back here. And this is something you definitely want to avoid because that can cause a lot of pain. And the proper position is what's called neutral. So we'll see the spine is nice and straight. There's no curvature one way or the other. Hips are back. Weight is centered straight through the middle of our foot as we pull that up and out. what you would see naturally on this one and this one, she had weight on the bar. She's doing this without weight. Weight would actually be sitting out over her toes, which is, again, not a position that you want to be in with the bar. I always tell our athletes when we're doing deadlifts to either wear pants or high socks, because in the proper form, you're going to be basically scraping your shins as you come up and down. You always want to keep that bar directly in the center of your body. And if we had this rotated 180, feet are going to be at shoulder width with the toes neutral, meaning everything's pointed forward. And when she's in this down position, we'd be looking for that outside angle on the knees as well. Okay, so this is called a sumo deadlift. This one is excellent for producing effects on the adductors or the inside of your thighs. If you've never done this type of exercise, great for people who are like into skating or hockey players and things like that, where you need a lot of adductor strength. We can see here, feet are obviously outside the shoulder, so this is a much wider stance. Toes are going to be slightly out 5 to 15 degrees on this one. And then the bar you're holding at shoulder width. And obviously on this, we're still seeing that outside knee angle. The knee is not outside the toe because it's impossible position. And then looking at this from the side, it looks almost identical to the previous one, except obviously now the arms are on the inside. But looking for that nice neutral back. He's got a little bit of hyperextension, but it's not bad. That could just be his posture position. And then that hips are back, weight. Obviously, we can't see his feet on this one, but that bar is going to be sitting right over the top of his feet as he goes to do the pull straight up. So anytime we're doing anything lifting from the ground, this is the position you need to be in. If you have access, your in-home gym has a mirror. I always have my athletes lift next to a mirror and make sure they can see that position before we start. If we don't have access to a mirror, I usually take videos so that we can kind of look back on what it's supposed to look like and make form corrections from there. All right,
what's a good way to get into the neutral position? Maybe just bend down, get hyperextended, and then realize it, and then go neutral.
Yeah. So what I have all of our athletes do. So like before we would even get into position here, let me see if this is a better one. Yeah, we'll go with this one. Is from a standing position. Basically, we go through the breathing exercises that we've been talking about, which is I'll take a deep breath in. On the exhale, we're going to push that rib cage down and then tilt our pelvis back, so we get that nice neutral spine. And then on the inhale, go into our hip hinge and then drop down to the bar. So I'm naturally in this position right here. And again, this is something we spend. It drives my athletes crazy, I know, but we spend hours and hours and hours just working on that hip hinge and being able to get to this position without really giving it a second thought. So it's that we address the bar, standing up, deep breath in, exhale, rib cage down, pelvic tilt, inhale, hinge to the bar. That's just something we do tons and tons and tons. So this would be actually the position that I'm talking about here. So if the bar was still on the ground, my athlete would take that exhale. We can see his rib cage is down. His belly is nice and tight. It's hard to see the pelvic tilt here, but is there. The glutes are squeezed, belly's tight. And then on that inhale, we would go into this proper hinge, which is again, the lift position. And eventually this bar would go all the way straight to the ground. Obviously, this is that rounded back position that we don't want to see. And again, if there was weight on this weight would be sitting out over his toes, which is exactly where you don't want it. We want it nice and tight in center of the body, that nice neutral back, hinged on the center of the heels. And then the other thing, I have one athlete who I've worked with for about 12 years now, and he does this every time, and it drives me crazy. He's been sending me videos over quarantine, and I just keep yelling at him for doing this. This is a hyperextension at the start, and basically all this does, if this bar was loaded up with 300-400 pounds and it's sitting like that, again, that weight would get pulled straight down to the low back and just sit there. We always need force of the weight to have an escape to the ground. So when I'm sitting in this neutral position, obviously that's pulling straight down and getting right down to our heels. The minute I put any sort of bend one way or the other in my back becomes the area where all of that weight sits. So we want to avoid this in the beginning. We're working with specifically teenage boys and stuff. This will be very common because they try to lift the weights quickly. They like to get things done very fast. Kids tend to be impatient. So when they'll come up on their deadlift, they'll throw their hips forward and, thinking they're doing their pelvic tilt, but all they're actually doing is hyperextending their back. And again, that's another reason why we do a lot of filming and stuff. So if this is an exercise that you're going to be doing in any in-home stuff, highly recommend having that mirror, checking yourself in the beginning. Basically, if you can draw a line from your ear, through your shoulder, through your hip, through your knee, the center of your foot, you're in the right position. When we're in the deadlift itself, if we can draw a line, again, center of the foot, through the knee, through the mid back, and that bar is sitting right over the top of our feet, we're in a very good position. This is something I do for myself. Even to this day, I still film myself and just make sure everything's looking in the proper position. Again, this is, fundamentally, this is one of the best lifts that you can do to produce healthy low back, upper activation on our glutes and hamstrings and stuff like we talked about last week. It just needs to be done in the right position. So, any other questions? No? All right. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Enjoy the week, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Take care.